In the heart of a Montana blizzard, the road vanished beneath waves of snow and silence. A motorcycle's engine roared once, slipped on black ice, then fell quiet, swallowed whole by the storm. Minutes later, a pickup truck pushed through the whiteout, tires gripping the frozen earth. Inside sat a former Navy SEAL, hands steady on the wheel, his loyal canine watching the darkness with unblinking eyes. Then the dog stiffened, not a bark, just a warning. The SEAL slowed, headlights cutting through the storm. And there, half buried in drifting snow, lay a fallen bike and a wounded biker, her Hells Angels patch frozen against the cold. A life on the edge of the road, and a choice that could never be ignored. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story reaches you, hit subscribe so you never miss another journey of loyalty, redemption, and courage. Your support truly means the world. The storm had swallowed the mountains whole, turning the Montana highway into a narrow ribbon of ice disappearing into a white abyss. Ethan Cole gripped the steering wheel with both hands, knuckles pale beneath calloused skin. At 38, he moved with a quiet economy, every motion controlled, shaped by training and sharpened by memory. His face bore strong lines, a square jaw shadowed by a dark short beard, ice crystals clinging to the hairs along his chin. His black brows were furrowed beneath the faint scar that cut through one eyebrow, a souvenir from a deployment nobody back home ever asked about. Ethan had the build of someone who maintained strength out of guilt of discipline rather than pride. Broad-shouldered, tall, with muscles shaped by effort rather than vanity, his gray eyes stayed fixed on the blizzard ahead, scanning for danger even when nothing was visible. Those eyes held a deep vigilance, as if always expecting something to go wrong. After years of service as a Navy SEAL, that feeling never quite left. Beside him, Atlas sat upright, perfectly balanced on the seat, despite the truck rocking against the wind. The German Shepherd was 6 years old, a powerful dog with a thick black and tan coat dusted with flecks of snow. His ears stood tall, his gaze sharp and alert, amber eyes shifting constantly with trained awareness. Atlas had been Ethan's partner for years, first in uniform, then in quieter times. And even now, the dog seemed carved from loyalty and instinct. The scar along his left flank, nearly hidden beneath his fur, told a story of its own. A past mission, a close call, a bullet that came too close. Ethan had almost lost him that night. Since then, Atlas had become more than a working dog. He was memory, anchor, and silent witness to a life Ethan sometimes wished he could forget. The truck's heater worked overtime, but the cold still sunk into Ethan's bones. Outside, the mountain road wound upward into deeper darkness, the pine forest bending under heavy blankets of snow. The wind howled and screamed, clashing against the old truck like fists demanding entry. The storm had come faster than forecast, turning the world into a colorless blur. Ethan leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. Something felt wrong, something beyond the storm itself. Atlas shifted, muscles tensing beneath thick fur. A sharp growl vibrated low in his throat, not loud, but meaningful. Ethan's pulse kicked up in response. They had learned to trust each other that way. One breath, one signal, one instinct at a time. He eased off the gas. The headlights swept across a bank of snow to the right, and suddenly the blur formed shape. A black motorcycle lay on its side, half buried, the back wheels still spinning slowly, as if reluctant to stop. Ethan's breath caught. A long, violent skid mark carved across the icy road, the kind that never ended well. Atlas leaned forward, ears rigid. Ethan threw the truck into park, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the door. Wind slashed through him like blades of ice. Within 3 steps, he saw her. Just beyond the toppled bike, a woman lay curled on the snow. She was on her side, one hand tucked beneath her, the other limp near her chest. Her jacket was thick leather, black with red stitching, a bright patch beneath the snow near her shoulder reading, Hells Angels. She wore a helmet cracked along one edge, dark hair spilling through the opening. Long, brown, tangled by frost and wind. Her jeans were torn at the knee, skin beneath pale as salt. She looked about 30, young, but not untouched by life. Her breathing was faint, whispering through parted lips. Ethan knelt beside her, brushing snow away from her face. She was striking, even in distress. Sharp cheekbones, strong jawline, a nose slightly crooked from an old break. Her features spoke of resilience, someone who had fought life, not floated through it. A small silver stud pierced the side of her nose, glittering against skin that had begun to lose warmth. Her eyelashes trembled once, then stilled. She was freezing. Ethan removed the helmet gently. Beneath the layer of snow and ice, he saw more details. Tattoos winding up her right arm. Intricate patterns of wings, gears, and flames. Her lips were blue-gray, cracked from cold air. A leather vest beneath her jacket bore another patch. Riley Brooks stitched in red thread. 32 years old, he guessed. Recently added to the club, if that fresh patch was any indication. A newcomer trying to prove herself. He could imagine the story already. Young biker, first winter ride, underestimated the black ice. That proud glint stitched into new leather was written across her body now. Pride, and the price of it. Atlas nosed her gently, ears lowered, breath steaming above her face. Riley didn't react. Ethan checked her pulse, faint, thready, but present. Relief hit him, sudden and painful. He slipped one arm beneath her shoulders and another beneath her knees, feeling how light she was in his hold. Tall but slender, toned musculature beneath the jacket, the build of someone who rode often and ran on adrenaline more than meals. She wore black boots scuffed from the road, laces frayed, soles worn thin. He carried her toward the truck, boots sinking deep into drifts. Each step jarred memories loose. Other rescues, other storms, other bodies. A different face under different moonlight, a night across the ocean, the voice in his earpiece saying, "Don't go back, we don't have time." He failed that night. He wouldn't fail this one. Atlas walked tight against Ethan's leg, shielding Riley from wind as if he understood. Together they moved like a single shape cut from shadow and snow. Ethan opened the passenger door and laid Riley gently across the seat. Atlas hopped in beside her, curling his body around hers like a living barrier against the cold. Riley shivered faintly, and Ethan felt his throat tighten, not from fear, but from something deeper, the recognition of a stranger whose fate had crossed his path at the worst possible moment. He turned the truck around and drove toward the cabin, a place he hadn't seen in years, the last home of the only man who ever taught him how to belong. That connection pulsed through him, threading past and present together. Perhaps fate chose its timing without mercy, but not without meaning. Riley's breath rasped softly, uneven. Ethan glanced at her, at Atlas, at the storm swallowing the world outside. Somewhere behind them, the motorcycle lay abandoned in the blizzard, its engine finally silent. Ahead waited the cabin, dark and distant, but still standing. For now, that was enough. And though neither Ethan nor Riley could know it yet, the moment the truck pulled away from that crash site was the moment their two broken paths began to align. The cabin welcomed them with darkness and the hollow echo of old wood remembering footsteps from decades before. Ethan pushed the door open carefully, shoulder first, ice cracking beneath the hinges. Atlas slipped in ahead, tail low but alert, the thick fur along his spine shimmering under the flashlight beam. Riley lay unconscious in Ethan's arms, her face paling by the minute as cold gnawed at her skin. The cabin smelled of dust, pine resin, and something faintly metallic, like forgotten nails rusting into the floorboards. Ethan placed Riley gently near the stone hearth, lowering her to a wool rug that had faded from red to brown with age. The cabin was small enough to see every corner from where he knelt. 2 chairs, 1 table, a shelf of mugs, and a cast-iron stove resting crookedly beside the fireplace. On the far wall hung a framed photograph of a tall, raw-boned man with wind-burned skin and tired eyes. Daniel Cole, Ethan's uncle, the man whose life revolved around weather warnings, forest trails, and quiet promises. Ethan's jaw tightened when he looked at that picture, memories pressing against his chest. He stacked wood into the fireplace, hands steady despite the trembling cold biting deep into his fingers. Flint struck, sparks caught, flames bloomed, licking warmth across the room. Atlas settled near the door, body stretched long, the heat from his coat blocking the chill that seeped from the cracks again and again. Ethan checked Riley's leg, a clear fracture, her shin angled wrong beneath her torn jeans. He cut open the denim around it with a pocket knife, jaw clenched in concentration. He worked with a precision born from battlefield medicine. He pressed gently along her shin bone, watching her face for reaction. Riley groaned, breath sharp and broken, lashes fluttering. Ethan's voice was low, threaded with calm authority. "Easy, you're safe." Riley stirred, her brown hair tangled around her cheeks. Her lips trembled with each shallow breath. As she drifted awake, her eyes, deep brown, glassy with pain and shock, met Ethan's gray ones. For several seconds, she didn't speak. Her gaze traced the cabin, rough logs, dancing firelight, and then she flinched, body tensing. "Where am I?" she whispered, voice rough. Ethan briefly explained the crash and the storm. She blinked heavy-lidded, trying to assemble memories that came like scattered sparks. She shifted her gaze downward and saw her leather jacket, black, heavy, marked with the Hells Angels emblem, hanging neatly from a nail on the wall. Relief flickered across her face, though she tried to hide it. That jacket was more than clothing. It was identity, belonging, survival. The patch on the back, white skull with wings, freshly sewn, meant she was still new, earning her place among people who didn't forgive mistakes easily. "You didn't trash it," she murmured, surprised. Ethan simply replied, "Not mine to trash." She touched her forehead, fingers coming away red. Ethan handed her a cloth dampened in warm water, his movements quiet, professional. Riley pressed it to her wound, noticing the worn leather gloves he still wore, the creases smoothed by years of hard work. She studied Ethan closer, his posture straight but weary, as if something inside him had been carrying too much for too long. His eyes were different from most men she had known, unflinching, observant, holding back more words than he spoke. She wondered what happened to him. Men didn't learn silence like that without losing something first. Atlas shifted, trotting closer. The dog looked enormous beside her. Thick neck, broad shoulders, amber eyes that gleamed with intelligence. Riley hesitated, then extended her fingers. Atlas sniffed once, then gently tugged at the cuff of her leather glove before lying on it protectively, earning a small laugh from her cracked lips. Ethan smirked faintly and shook his head. "He's claiming salvage rights." Riley raised a brow. "Cute. Bet he doesn't know I can bench press a Harley." Ethan let out a soft exhale, almost a laugh. Almost. Now fully conscious, Riley tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her leg, her breath hitching. Ethan steadied her shoulder with one hand, not forceful, just steady. "Don't. The bone's not right." Riley winced, jaw tightening. She hated feeling weak, powerless. It reminded her of the night she lost her parents. Car crash, rain-slick roads, headlights slicing through darkness. 17 years old, left with nothing but noise and wreckage, the world colder when she climbed out of that hospital alone. She swallowed hard, pushing the memory away. She didn't like people seeing vulnerability. Vulnerability was dangerous. "You saved me," she said softly, as if the words tasted unfamiliar. Ethan shrugged, eyes flicking to the fire. "Storm did most of the work. I just showed up late." The truth was more complicated. In Riley, Ethan saw echoes of himself, someone trying to survive more than just weather, but he didn't say that. Words like those felt too fragile in a place this quiet. Riley looked around, noting the mismatched furniture, the old coffee tin filled with nails, the walls that held their age proudly. "This place yours?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "My uncle's, Ranger, lived here most of his life." Riley nodded slowly, as if she could feel the man in the room's bones. "Seems like the kind of place that matters." Ethan didn't answer. His gaze drifted to Daniel's photograph again, and something shuddered across his expression. Riley noticed, but didn't pry. They both seemed to understand that some truths belong to another time. Outside, wind shrieked against the walls, shaking the window panes. Inside, flame shadows danced across Riley's face, softening her bruised cheekbone and the angry cut above her eyebrow. She eased back against the blankets, the pain dulling but not fading. Ethan wrapped her ankle and knee in a thick knit blanket, then covered her again with another layer. Riley watched him work, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not used to people looking out for me." Ethan replied without hesitation, "Get used to it, at least tonight." Atlas settled once more at Riley's side, chin resting on her boot. Fire crackled, the storm roared, and for the first time since she hit the road, Riley Brooks felt something strange. Something that tasted almost like safety. Morning came slowly, as if reluctant to peel back the storm's thick curtain. The wind had weakened, but the whisper of it still crept beneath the cabin walls, carrying the distant groaning of snow-laden pines. Ethan sat near the fire, feeding a log into the flames. He had barely slept. His eyes, though steady, were ringed with fatigue. Riley lay on the cot nearby, legs splinted and wrapped, her breathing slower, deeper. Atlas had kept watch beside her, a quiet sentinel with fur warmed by the hearth's glow. The dog stretched now, his lean, muscular frame unfolding with the unspoken dignity that had always defined him. His amber eyes flicked between Ethan and Riley, as if reading the emotional current beneath the silence. When Riley pushed herself upright, hands braced behind her, jaw clenched against the pain, Ethan looked over without speaking. She caught the glance, ironic amusement tugging faintly at her bruised mouth. "Staring won't make the storm end faster," she said. Ethan turned back to the fire, the faintest ghost of a smile crossing his face. "Didn't say it would." Their words were simple, but the quiet between them felt softer than the night before. Ethan made breakfast, oatmeal, water boiled from melted snow, and a pinch of salt from a tin that looked older than the cabin itself. Riley accepted the bowl with one hand, balancing it carefully on her thigh. Even in the dim light, it was clear she looked stronger now, her cheeks less drained, her eyes sharper. But the pain was still there, cinched deep in her muscles. She winced with each shift of her weight, her breath catching whenever she flexed her toes. Atlas nudged her arm, perhaps sensing her frustration. They talked, at first about nothing. The thickness of the snowdrifts outside, the temperature dropping overnight, the groaning wood beams that warned of settling ice. Riley described the ache in her shin as if it were a stubborn engine refusing to turn. Ethan listened quietly, answering occasionally with observations shaped by medical training and lived experience. Yet he avoided questions about personal things, as if the answers might unlock something he didn't want exposed. When the fire crackled low, Ethan stood, grabbed an axe from the corner, and stepped outside to split more wood. The air out there was bitter, sharp enough to sting the lungs. His breath rose in thick clouds as he faced the chopping block. Atlas followed, paws sinking into snow that reached halfway up his legs. Ethan swung the axe in slow, controlled strokes, precision over force, as always. Every crack of splitting wood echoed into the trees. Inside, Riley watched through the frosted window. She noticed his movements, the way he leaned slightly to his left, favoring an old injury perhaps. His shoulders, broad but tense, his jaw locked set, the scar etched above his brow catching the pale light. She wondered how someone could appear so anchored and yet carry such weight in silence. When he returned with an armful of wood, cheeks flushed from cold, she asked, "You always this quiet?" Ethan shrugged, setting the logs down. "Talking doesn't help the fire burn," Riley smirked. "You know what I mean." He did. He just wasn't eager to answer. Hours passed, the storm shifting from violent to steady. Riley practiced sitting up and balancing her weight, using one arm pressed firmly against the wall. She gritted her teeth through the pain, brow beading with sweat despite the chill. Ethan positioned a chair nearby in case she fell. He didn't comment, didn't advise caution. He simply made the space safer. Atlas remained close, tail sweeping the rug. Around midday, the wind quieted further. Sunlight pressed weakly through the window, revealing dust motes dancing above Riley's jacket on the wall. She stared at the Hells Angels emblem, expression unreadable. Ethan noticed her gaze and waited. He wasn't good at prying, but he knew when someone was wrestling memories. Riley spoke first. "That patch on the jacket? Not many people get it. Not even fewer people deserve it." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag. "You think you don't?" She laughed, sharp, brittle. "I think I wanted proof I didn't break as easily as I felt." Silence filled the room again. Ethan sat, arms folded, gaze on the fire. Riley inhaled, long and slow, then began talking. Not rushed, not dramatic, just truth peeling itself open. She told him about leading a group of young riders last winter, eager to impress, eager to show she could command respect. She described the black ice, the curve of the road, the 19-year-old boy whose bike spun out from under him. His name was Jordan. Skinny kid, quick smile, nerves made of glass. Lives were not meant to hinge on temperature shifts, but sometimes they did. Jordan survived, but not whole. Broken pelvis, nerve damage, never rode again. Riley's voice shook once, then steadied. "I told them the road was fine. Low risk," I said, just like that. Low risk. Ethan sat very still, eyes fixed on the flames. "Low risk is where people get hurt," he said finally. "We both know that." Riley nodded. Every line in her face tightened, with the weight of memory. "That's the night I joined the club. Thought I'd be safer with people who feared nothing." She shrugged. "Turns out, fear's not the enemy. Ignoring it is." Ethan looked up at her, and something in his expression shifted. An opening, a flicker of exposed truth. He spoke about his Uncle Daniel, the message he never answered, the storm that took the man who had raised him. "He reached out," Ethan said quietly. I didn't respond. I thought there'd be time. Then there wasn't. Riley's gaze softened. She rested her hand on Atlas's head, fingers slipping into warm fur. The dog's eyes closed almost instantly, leaning into her touch, as if the three of them, man, dog, stranger, shared a language deeper than words. Outside, the trees moaned under shifting snow. Inside, the confession settled like thawing ice. Slow, painful, necessary. Ethan exhaled, long and tired, and Riley leaned back, eyes half closed but clearer somehow. Atlas nudged closer, bridging the distance as if determined to keep the two from drifting apart into the silence again. The storm was still out there, but inside the cabin, something else began. A fragile connection stitched together by guilt, honesty, and the simple fact that neither of them was alone in their breaking anymore. The storm had thinned into ragged threads of snowfall by late afternoon, sunlight filtering through cracks in the clouds like hesitant forgiveness. Ethan stood at the window, arms folded, watching wisps of white dust swirl across the clearing. Riley sat propped on the cot, balancing her weight with one hand pressed to the wall, legs still bound in splints and blankets. Her phone, long silent, buzzed weakly against her thigh. The signal flickered like a dying bulb, barely there, but enough. When Riley saw the string of messages lighting up her screen, she sighed through clenched teeth. Ethan glanced over, the tension in her face drawing his attention before she spoke a word. "Guess the news travels fast," she muttered. Her voice held a bite, but something tender flickered underneath. She scrolled, thumb trembling slightly. Text from other new writers in her chapter of Hell's Angels, mocking her crash. One message read, "That's what happens when rookies chase storms instead of bars." Another, "Delete the route before the boys see it. They'll laugh you out of the clubhouse." No one asked if she was alive, not one word about the ice, the danger, the silence of the mountain. She swallowed hard, anger simmering beneath her skin. Ethan said nothing at first. He just watched her grip tighten around the phone until her knuckles blanched. Atlas lifted his head from the floor, ears flicking forward, sensing the shift. Riley rubbed her temple and forced a brittle laugh, sharp and humorless. "They're going to turn this into a bar story," she said. "A joke, a punchline." Snow ticked against the window pane like fingernails. Riley stared past the glass and into the woods beyond, where the road vanished into white. The landscape felt endless, indifferent. Yet, in that bleak distance, something stirred in her expression. Awareness, maybe purpose. "Look at that," she said softly, pointing toward the twisting outline of highway just visible through the trees. "All that snow. Anyone could disappear in it. One patch of black ice and poof." Ethan followed her gaze. The wind gusted, swirling the white veil thicker. "Mountain doesn't care where you're headed," he said. "Only whether you're paying attention." Riley huffed a single breath. "And no one out there is paying attention." She looked back toward her phone. The mockery in those messages wasn't just about her. It was about a culture she'd been trying to belong to. Loud, fearless, reckless, dangerous. "What if," she said slowly, "instead of proving how stupidly brave we are, we used what we know to protect people?" Ethan lifted an eyebrow, unsure where she was headed. Riley leaned forward, eyes igniting. "Bikers know these roads, every bend, every trap, every blind ridge. If the wolves know the path, why not lead others out of the storm instead of into it?" Her voice shook with conviction. Ethan listened carefully. Then something softened in his shoulders. "Go on," he said. Riley took a deeper breath. "Your uncle's cabin. It's perfect. Remote but reachable. Shelter, warmth, supplies. We turn it into a winter safety station. Anyone stuck out there could make it here instead of freezing by the roadside." Ethan stared at the hearth, where the fire glowed low and steady, where Daniel's memory still warmed the air with quiet legacy. "He'd like that," he murmured. Riley pushed further. "We get more riders, people who actually care about the folks on these roads, to help. Biker, hiker, trucker, local. Doesn't matter. People who know these mountains better than any map. We mark danger spots, drop emergency supply boxes, share weather conditions in real time, build a network." Ethan turned to her fully now, jaw set. "Bikers don't take orders from strangers." Riley smirked. "Good thing I'm not a stranger." She tapped her phone and opened a contact labeled with the name Casey Turner. Casey was a friend from before Riley joined Hell's Angels. A lanky man in his mid-20s with blonde hair kept in a messy ponytail and a narrow face that always looked slightly windburned. Casey had a strange mixture of shyness and razor-edged humor. He'd grown up riding dirt trails, learning every twist of the mountain roads from his father, who ran a small repair shop in a nearby town before passing away. His father's sudden death had sharpened Casey's worldview. He rode less for thrill and more for remembrance, for connection. Riley trusted him, perhaps more than she trusted anyone. She sent a brief message: "Need help, not for riding, for saving." Reception wavered, then the message delivered. Riley's chest rose and fell with tentative relief. Not 30 minutes later, a reply buzzed through. "Storm's lifting, I'm coming, 2 others with me." Riley let the phone fall into her lap. "They're on their way." Ethan exhaled slowly. "You sure you want to involve others before you're back on your feet?" Riley pressed a palm to her splinted leg. "If I wait until I'm whole, someone else won't be. Not doing that again." Ethan studied her for a long moment. Her expression held no bravado now, just resolve, born from pain she couldn't undo. Finally, he nodded. Atlas stood up. The big dog gave a low bark at the door, tail stiff with anticipation. He sensed movement beyond the tree line, footsteps crunching through snow, approaching fast. Ethan opened the door, and cold air punched into the cabin. 3 figures emerged from the white. Casey in front, wearing a green parka patched at the elbows, jawline dusted with day-old stubble. Beside him walked Marlon Hayes, a broad man in his 40s, skin deep brown, beard thick and threaded with gray. Marlon had the build of a former boxer, powerful shoulders, neck like a tree trunk. His boots were old, but well cared for, the kind passed from father to son. Marlon had lost a nephew in a winter accident years ago, and since then, he rode with a careful eye and a heavy heart. The third rider, Skylar Reed, was barely 20, short, freckled, hair chopped unevenly and dyed orange at the tips. Skylar was fearless in the way only young people could be, carrying a shock of defiant enthusiasm that masked lingering uncertainty about where she fit in the world. Casey's blue eyes widened when he saw Riley inside, pale but sitting upright. "Holy hell, Riley." His voice cracked with emotion. Riley rolled her eyes. "Relax, I'm not dead, just stupid." Marlon gave a deep grunt, half laugh, half concern. Skylar rushed forward, almost tripping on an uneven board, her freckles bright against flushed cheeks. "This place is unreal," she breathed, spinning toward the walls hung with tools and lanterns. Ethan stepped forward, posture protective but not unwelcoming. He introduced himself minimally, voice neutral, gaze assessing each newcomer. With everyone inside, Riley laid out her plan in more detail. How riders could patrol routes when storms rolled in, how they could leave supply boxes tucked near tree lines, how to mark black ice zones using colored ribbons tied to branches. Casey nodded vigorously. "Makes perfect sense," he said, eyes glimmering. "Nobody knows these roads like we do." Marlon crossed his arms, gaze heavy with memory. "Might save someone like my nephew," he murmured. Skylar punched her fist into her palm. "Sign me up. I'm so in." Atlas paced between them, tail wagging, occasionally nudging the riders as if assigning positions in some strategy only he could see. Ethan watched the group, this unlikely gathering of bikers and wanderers, and felt something shift inside him. Daniel's cabin, once filled with ghosts, now filled with purpose. They agreed to start at dawn. For now, they would rest, plan, and eat. Ethan warmed extra stew on the stove, set out old mugs for melted snow water. Riley leaned back, exhaustion tugging her eyelids. Around her, voices buzzed, low, determined, alive. Atlas lay against her leg, steady and warm. She whispered, almost to herself, "Wolves don't always hunt." Ethan overheard, met her gaze, and replied quietly, "Sometimes they guard." Outside, the storm exhaled its final breath. Inside, the road ahead began to take shape. One mapped not by fear, but by intention. By early spring, the mountains still wore winter like a memory that refused to melt. The snowpack lay thick in the shaded stretches of the forest, and the air clung to the cold with an almost stubborn loyalty. Yet beneath that familiar frost, something had shifted. The cabin, Daniel's cabin, no longer sat abandoned beneath its crust of ice. Smoke curled from the chimney most mornings, new footprints crossed its clearing, and the laughter of strangers occasionally mingled with the steady hum of saws or the thud of boots. The wolves, as Riley sometimes called them, had begun to claim the road. Inside, Ethan stood at the wooden workbench tightening a bolt on a portable heater that had been donated by a local driver who once needed shelter. His hands moved with practiced ease, broad fingers, knuckles roughened, veins raised beneath scars faded pale. His concentration remained sharp even now, though the air had gentled in recent days, the storm replaced by the patient push toward renewal. Atlas dozed nearby, body curled and twitching in sleep, paws moving as though chasing some remembered rhythm through trees. The dog had grown heavier with rest and good meals since the worst days of winter, his fur thick and gleaming, eyes bright when awake, tail expressive as a banner when meeting new travelers. Age had not dulled him. If anything, purpose energized him. He had become the clearing's guardian, the first silent greeting to every stranger who made it to the cabin's door. Riley limped across the room, her fractured leg now strong enough to bear weight, with only a faint hitch in her stride. Her dark hair, grown longer during weeks inside, was tied back into a simple knot. Her leather jacket hung proudly across her shoulders, the Hells Angels patch still visible, though now accompanied by a new sewn strip beneath it, worked in dark thread. Warden of Winter Road. Her brown eyes gleamed with hard-earned steadiness. She wore a small silver ring through one ear, glinting whenever she turned her head, a subtle mark of individuality that contrasted starkly with the tattoos climbing her forearms. Those inked flames, once symbolic of speed and bravado, now seemed to speak, instead of endurance and pain, survived. Outside, Casey Turner was hammering a reflective marker into frozen ground, muscles showing beneath his layered flannel. He had found new direction in this work, riding less for adrenaline, more for the people he passed. His blonde hair whipped across his forehead, cheeks reddened by cold and exertion. He hummed as he worked, low and tuneless, almost joyful. Marlon Hayes hauled a crate of supplies from a snowmobile parked at the tree line, large frame moving with surprising grace despite his size. His thick beard glittered with snow, and he wore the solemn focus of a man who understood loss intimately. Young Skylar Reed jogged back and forth between them, short bright hair catching flecks of white, breath bursting into the air in uneven puffs. She scribbled notes into a battered notebook, recording each supply drop and hazard marker, her excitement nearly vibrating from her limbs. The day felt peaceful enough that Ethan almost smiled as he watched them work. Almost. There was something different in him now, a looseness in his jaw, a subtle relaxation around the eyes. Perhaps he was learning to breathe more deeply. The guilt about Daniel had not vanished, but its edges had softened. The forest that had once reminded him of loss now echoed with collaboration, and the isolation he had wrapped around himself for years was beginning to crack. Not everyone saw things that way. Riley leaned against the doorframe, staring out at the road while chewing the inside of her cheek. Earlier that morning, she had received a message through an encrypted biker channel. Short, cruel, and unmistakable. Patch traitor. Others followed. Warnings, threats, intimations that her place in the club was finished. The Hells Angels, chapter she once craved acceptance from, saw her new path as betrayal. They believed she was turning the Brotherhood into a rescue squad, mocking their lineage of rebellion. Riley had expected pushback, but the venom still stung. She looked down at the ground, jaw twitching, wrestling with anger. She whispered, "They think I went soft." Ethan heard the words, though she hadn't meant them for him. He set down the wrench and stepped closer. Cold doesn't care how tough anyone looks. Road doesn't care what patch you wear. Riley's expression flickered with bitter humor. But people do. A knock sounded at the door, 3 sharp taps. Casey stuck his head in, hair wild from wind. "Hey, Riley," he said, voice edged with excitement. "Got news from a trucker we helped last week. Said the cabin saved his rig when brakes froze on the ridge. Called us the Snow Wolves." The name drew an unguarded laugh from Riley, the sound rusty yet warm. "Snow Wolves," she repeated. "Better than Patch Traitor." Later, when the sun drifted lower and shadows lengthened across the clearing, Ethan gathered the group indoors to finalize plans for a full winter season of patrols. They sat around the rough wooden table, maps unrolled beneath their hands. Casey traced a finger along a mountain ridgeline. "This stretch needs more markers. Nearly lost a rider here last Friday." Marlon pointed to a canyon road. "Put a box here. Storm funnel. Hunter nearly froze." Skylar circled a bend near a steep grade. "Let's light this up with reflectors. My bike skid there twice last night." Ethan nodded, absorbing each suggestion with military focus. He marked every change on the master chart hanging by the door. Atlas trotted around the table, tail brushing boots, occasionally dropping his head into a lap, as though reminding each person that connection mattered more than the cold. Riley watched the dog, then the people gathered, and realized the aching emptiness she, once carried, had been replaced by something startling, belonging not given, but earned. As dusk settled in, Riley stepped outside with Ethan and Atlas. Snow drifted lightly from the treetops, catching in the fading light like ash from an old fire. Reflective markers dotted the slope below, glinting silver and gold against the white. The road, once invisible, now shone in fragments, like pieces of a promise. Ethan leaned on the porch railing. The wood was worn smooth in spots, rough in others, carved with initials his uncle had etched decades ago. His voice, low and thoughtful, broke the quiet. "I used to think I'd fix things later," he said. "After the storm, after the next mission, after—" He stopped, shaking his head once. Riley stepped closer. She didn't need him to finish. "Life doesn't happen later," she said softly. "It happens now." Her breath curled in the cold, merging with his. Atlas nudged both their legs, tail sweeping in slow arcs of gentle insistence. Ethan exhaled. "Storm will come again," he murmured. Riley smiled, eyes warm with newfound strength. "Let it. We'll be ready." Atlas barked softly, as if in confirmation, scattering snow across their boots. In the distance, the forest hummed with possibility. The wolves had found their road. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder or lightning. They come quietly, through people who choose to stop when others pass by, through hands that lift instead of judge, through voices that say, "I'm here," in the cold places of the world. God does not always take away the storm, but he places light inside it, a stranger who becomes family, a road that becomes safer, a future that becomes possible. Ethan, Riley, Atlas, and all who walk that frozen mountain remind us that we do not survive alone. We survive together. And just like that road in the snow, our own daily lives offer crossroads, moments when we could turn away or step forward and help, moments when we could stay silent or speak hope, moments when we could wait for later or act now. Because tomorrow is not promised, but goodness always is. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who may need strength today. Leave a comment, tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe to join us on the next journey. May God watch over you and those you love. May he guide your steps on every road you travel. And may he place small miracles in your life exactly when you need them. Amen.